Okay, so just to continue. So the evaluation of drive theory, though, it is flawed. Drive theory can't explain why an elite athlete who's practiced and had lots of experience still has off days despite well-learned tasks. Extreme example is when the athlete freezes on the starting block. Difficult to define what's meant by well-learned as well. It's even more difficult to test in real life because many tasks are both well-learned and novel. So if you think about sports where you're playing against a team, things can happen in a match or in a boxing match or in a football match or wherever that have never happened to you before in a game. So, you know, things can happen in the crowd, things can happen on the pitch, the ref can make decisions that you've never seen before. So it's difficult to distinguish really what's the well-learned and what's the novel. It's difficult to test that, to measure it. So it's reductionist. Other factors which impact on sporting performance may also include personality, motivation, team cohesion, leadership, coaching, to name but a few. I mean, think about the biggest influence is probably the amount of funding that an athlete is going to receive because they get support in all of these things. So it's probably a little bit too simplistic. So, second up, arousal performance for inverted U hypothesis. So this is an alternative theory. Yerkes and Dodgson, 1908, proposed that there's going to be an optimum level of arousal for every motor task. Okay, so different tasks might receive different optimal arousal. Performance is best at the optimal level and drops off when arousal rises above or falls below it. So as levels of arousal increase past the optimal level, sporting performance will gradually decline. So you get this bell-shaped, and performance is increasing here. So this is the optimal point for this particular athlete. Their arousal wants to be just in the middle. Doesn't want to be too high, doesn't want to be too low, and that's where you'll get the best performance. But if they become too aroused, if it's too stressful, then you're going to start to see a drop-off in performance. So Lewis Hamilton and Formula One drivers and things talk about being in the zone. And if they're not in the zone, they talk about a window, getting their car into a window of performance. And really what they mean is probably the feeling of that if you're in that sweet spot, then your performance is great. But if it doesn't feel right, then it can start to go the other way. When sports players get angry and lose their temper, they end up getting sent off, and that's no good for their performance. That's damaging to the team because they see the red mist. So they become too angry, they become too aroused, and the performance dips off. So the model suggests that easy tasks are best performed when drive or arousal is high. So arousal being high, and complex tasks are best performed when drive is low. So broadly speaking, you're saying perhaps for people who have to really concentrate, people who have to do really complex tasks, then you need more arousal to be able to concentrate on it. But, sorry, I just said that the opposite way around. Let me reverse that. Sorry. So, easy tasks, when you have high arousal, right? So let's say you are... let's say you're going to do a 100-metre race, and you have to be absolutely on the beat of the bang of the gun, fire out the blocks, and you beat everyone, right? It's a simple task. It's all about how fast you can run. There's not a lot of complexity other than going right on the beat of the bang. So you want lots of arousal in this kind of sport. And that's going to help best because arousal can be used really well. But if you're trying to do a complex task, then you see a different shape. There's kind of two, one here and one here for complex tasks and easy tasks. So the complex tasks best performed when drive is low. So your arousal is lower. It allows you to focus more on the complex tasks. If you think about in class, if you're trying to learn something really complicated, right, and it starts to stress you out, and your blood pressure goes up, and your heart rate goes up, because you're trying to learn something really complex, your performance immediately starts to drop. You go, no, I can't do it. No, it's useless. No, I'm getting really wound up now. I can't do it. Whereas if you're doing something really simple, you're just playing a Kahoot, you can be pumped, and that's fine. The more arousal is good, you're quicker off the block. So they do distinguish between the two. So, bit of evaluation. The inverted U hypothesis is better than drive theory in explaining why even top sports people might have bad days, because you can see with that the performance is at least dropping off. The drive theory is pretty much just a positive relationship, just continuously more arousal gets you more performance if you've rehearsed. So it seems to make more sense. It can't explain why a professional athlete might see a sudden catastrophic decline in their performance rather than a gradual decline. So it doesn't enable us to go, oh look, that person's got to that point and then one thing's happened and they've absolutely plummeted in their performance, which does happen. If you watch the video at the start, the table tennis player being interviewed by Jon Snow, he, we did great, got to the semi-finals or finals, can't remember which one it was, and he just plummeted. He didn't have a gradual drop-off when arousal got high. His arousal got high and he just absolutely plummeted and was rubbish. I could have done better than him. I couldn't. It doesn't account for individual differences, either the type of sport or even the type of tasks. So the Oxendine researcher we'll have a look at in a sec. So, yeah, types of sports. This isn't going to be the same for archery as it is for football, or it's unlikely to be. Not going to be the same for chess as it is for bobsleighing. So there's an awful lot of individual differences within sport that if we're trying to reduce it down to a simple or a simplistic theory, then it's difficult. And again, it's also difficult methodologically to measure. And the reason for that is, how can you measure top athletes in the middle of a performance? If you want to measure the anxiety and arousal of, a 100-metre runner at the Olympics, none of them are going to say, yeah, sure, do a piece of research on me midway down the track, because this is the biggest moment of their life. So I think methodologically, it's very difficult to get access to actually measure these things. So, as I mentioned, Oxendine extended the U hypothesis. So we mentioned this before. This was how those different types of performance could, the different types of tasks. Golf, weightlifting. So for golf, the higher your arousal, the more damaging it's going to be. Golf, you need very low levels of arousal because the cognitive task, staying calm, keeping your hands steady, is much more important. So if you get too much arousal, even moderate arousal, then it's going to die off. Yeah, it's like snooker as well. You want nice and quiet in the crowd, so you can really concentrate. So for fine motor skills, we're going to refer to them as FMS, fine motor skills. That's your golf, that's your snooker. For GMS, then that's your, rugby, your weightlifting. That's where you want high levels of arousal, and that benefits you more than it would in golf. The drop-off is much later for GMS sports. Okay. So, nice and simple, but Oxendine was giving more details, developing the theory. So Oxendine suggested high arousal experienced under the pressure of competition impedes the tasks that require FMS and cannot account for the mistakes made in competition in sports such as gymnastics. This might explain the gymnastic taking a tumble. Okay, so yeah, high arousal experienced under great competition that require fine motor skills. So a quick example of those. Here we are. GMS sports, golf teeing off compared to a rugby scrum. FMS, putting in golf compared to rugby. Okay, so conversion in rugby, lots of concentration on Johnny Wilkinson's face there. Got to really concentrate, so that turns into a fine motor skill. whereas the scrum is a GMS. The more arousal you have, the stronger you can push, the better you are in the scrum. So GMS and FMS. And so some examples, just to go a bit further. Level 5 GMS, extreme arousal, American football, weightlifting, rugby. And down at the bottom, we've got archery, golf putting and bowling. Probably a bit of curling down there in the Winter Olympics. Something that you watch, and those of us who aren't particularly physical go, oh, I could do a bit of curling. I'd be good at the archery. I'd be good at the shooting. So, you can have a go at this task. On a graph, mark the x-axis, level of arousal. The y-axis on the vertical being level of performance, and then draw a U-shaped curve to show the relationship between arousal and performance. So for the individual difference, novice and professional, golf versus rugby, and putting in golf versus taking a conversion in rugby, or teeing off in golf versus a scrum in rugby. Okay. Come back to me, press play once you've had a go at that. Therefore, high and low levels of arousal and stress can be seen as both positive and negative experiences. However, anxiety is always a negative emotional state in which we experience high arousal, accompanied by worrying and feelings of apprehension. So, arousal can be really positive, stress can be positive, but anxiety is negative. High arousal accompanied by worrying, feelings of apprehension. So, if we just focus on anxiety for a minute, we've got two different sides to look at this. Trait is your disposition, okay? We're talking situational disposition largely here. But trait is your stable personality characteristic. Are you an anxious person? I'm an anxious person, believe it or not. Seems very cool, but I'm an anxious person, and lots of my family are anxious people. So there is an argument that anxiety can be something that is genetic, that your nervous system is built in a way that predisposes you to be quite an anxious individual. So that's a trait, stable personality trait. Pop that down. We can't do too much about that, even though we can do things like CBT, which is in one of your applications. The other side of it is state. This is anxiety experienced before and during competition. So this is more situational. The state that you're in at that time, or the state where you are before, during competition. However, Martin's 90 arrived at a multi-dimensional model of anxiety which analyses somatic, cognitive and self-confidence. So what we break down to here is we've still got trait and state, but we break the state down into a somatic state, and somatic state means your physiological arousal, and you've got your cognitive state, which is your psychological, so this is your bodily response, this is your mind's response, fear, etc. But this is your physiological heart rate, etc., etc. So you've got your somatic state, your cognitive state, and a separate one for self-confidence. So how self-confident are you feeling at that point? Okay, because we all vary in our times of I'm feeling good today, I'm feeling confident, I'm not feeling confident today. So although self-confidence can be a stable trait, it does also change according to the state that you're in, according to the day that you're in or the situation that you're in. So, to summarise that, anxiety, state and trait, we'll have a look at these two ways of measuring it. So Martins came up with the SCAT, the Sport Competition Anxiety Test. That's for trait. And the competitive state anxiety. So the CSAI-2, Competitive State Anxiety Inventory, which measured self-confidence, cognitive and somatic state. So we will have a look at that. Let's open up the SCAT first.